Lucifer, pride. Lucifer is the prince who embodies the first and deadliest sin, pride. Once a radiant angel, described as the morning star, Lucifer was said to be more brilliant than any other of God's creations. Yet it was his very light that blinded him. Convinced of his own perfection, he could no longer bow in service, he longed instead to rule. His pride drove him to imagine equality with the Almighty, even superiority, and in that moment he fell into rebellion. Christian tradition remembers this fall as the prototype of all sin. Pride was the seed that corrupted heaven itself, the arrogance that turned an angel into the adversary of God. Bensfeld understood this clearly. If every sin drags a soul away from virtue, pride is the current pulling them all downstream. It is the refusal to accept any authority but one's own, the temptation to elevate the self above every law, every limit, even above the Creator. In art, Lucifer is often shown as a once beautiful angel twisting into something grotesque, feathers burning into scales, wings blackened, his fall captured as both tragic and terrifying. Some scholars fuse him with Satan, calling him the ruler of hell itself, while others distinguish between the tempter of wrath and the fallen angel of pride. But whatever the name, Lucifer's story endures as the ultimate warning. Greatness corrupted by arrogance collapses into ruin. Pride is the poison that crowns itself king, and in doing so, forges its own chains.
Mammon, greed. If Lucifer fell through pride, Mammon reigns through possession. He is the prince of greed, the endless craving for wealth, status, and power, a hunger that is never satisfied. In the New Testament, Mammon appears not as a person, but as a force. Christ warned that no man can serve both God and Mammon, for to serve greed is to make wealth your god. Over time, this idea hardened into a figure, a demon seated on a throne of gold, clutching coins so tightly his fingers become claws. By the Middle Ages, Mammon had become more than symbol. He was painted into manuscripts and whispered about in sermons as a prince of hell. Some envisioned him as a corpulent banker, weighed down by jewels, others as a skeletal miser, forever counting coins that turned to ash in his hands. His chains are not iron, but treasure, wealth that enslaves him as surely as he enslaves others. Bensfeld recognized him as the Lord of Greed, the one who whispers into the ears of kings who bleed their kingdoms dry, of merchants who cheat their neighbors, of men and women who measure their worth not by virtue, but by possession. Greed under Mammon's rule is not about survival, it is about excess, the relentless pursuit of more, even if it rots the soul. Where gluttony feeds the body, greed feeds the ego. It is the hunger to own, to dominate, to hoard while others starve. And under Mammon's gaze, gold ceases to be a tool and becomes an idol. He is the reminder that in hell, even treasure corrodes, and the hand that clings to it is never free.
Asmodeus, lust. Among Bensfeld's princes, none is more infamous for desire than Asmodeus, the embodiment of lust. His name surfaces in the book of Tobit, where he appears not as a distant tempter, but as a direct destroyer. Obsessed with a woman named Sarah, Asmodeus would not allow her to marry. Each time a husband drew near, he struck, killing 7 men on their wedding night before the marriage could be consummated. His obsession was so relentless that only the intervention of Archangel Raphael could drive him away, banished by the bitter smoke of a burning fish's heart and liver. Later traditions deepened his story. In the Testament of Solomon and rabbinic writings, Asmodeus contends with King Solomon himself, sometimes aiding, sometimes opposing, a reminder that lust can masquerade as help before revealing itself as ruin. In certain mystical texts, he even takes Lilith as his queen, ruling together as the dark sovereigns of desire. Artists imagined him as both charming and monstrous, at times a handsome figure, capable of seducing kings and queens, at others a grotesque hybrid bearing 3 heads, a man, a ram, and a bull, riding a dragon across the skies. Both images tell the same truth. Lust is alluring at first glance, but beneath lies a beast. For Bensfeld, Asmodeus was not merely about the sins of the flesh. Lust is the fire that consumes relationships, distorts love into possession, and leaves only ashes. It is desire that feeds not on union, but on domination. Under his rule, pleasure becomes prison, intimacy becomes obsession, and what was meant to join souls together becomes the very force that tears them apart. Leviathan, envy. Where some princes whisper temptation, Leviathan roars from the abyss. He is the embodiment of envy, the green fire that resents every blessing not its own. In the Hebrew scriptures, Leviathan was a monstrous sea creature, vast, coiling, and terrifying, a beast of chaos that no net could bind and no spear could pierce. But within Christian imagination, this ancient serpent took on a new role, not merely a creature of the sea, but the demon of envy, the devourer of joy. Medieval art often depicted hell's very entrance as a colossal gaping mouth, the hellmouth. To Binsfeld, Leviathan was that maw. The envious are swallowed whole, their souls consumed by the very jealousy that poisoned them in life. Thomas Aquinas described envy as sorrow at another's good, a bitterness that longs not only to possess, but to see another stripped bare. Leviathan personifies this hunger. His form changes across cultures, sometimes a writhing sea serpent that coils around the earth, sometimes a whale vast enough to swallow cities, other times a crocodile with jaws like gates. But in every guise, he is the same, an image of envy's endless appetite, a mouth that devours without ever being filled. Binsfeld saw envy as a sin uniquely corrosive. Unlike lust or greed, it seeks no pleasure of its own. Envy only desires destruction. If I cannot have, neither shall you. Under Leviathan's reign, envy does not simply want. It gnashes its teeth at another's fortune, gnaws away at peace, and leaves behind only bitterness and ruin.
Beelzebub is gluttony. He devours in excess. Named the Lord of the Flies, he is bound to the sin of gluttony, the appetite without restraint, the hunger that consumes not to live, but simply to keep consuming. The name Beelzebub began long before Binsfeld. In the ancient city of Ekron, the Philistines worshipped a god called Baal-zebul, the exalted Lord. But as time passed and cultures clashed, his title was twisted into mockery, Baal-zebub, Lord of Flies, a name that conjured images of rot, decay, and swarms feeding on carrion. By the medieval period, Beelzebub had become one of the most reviled demons, his very name a synonym for corruption. Writers such as Johann Weyer described him as Lucifer's most trusted lieutenant, second only to the fallen angel himself. In Milton's Paradise Lost, Beelzebub is a strategist, eloquent, cunning, a voice of reason in Hell's council. Yet Binsfeld linked him to gluttony, seeing him as the incarnation of insatiable appetite. Gluttony, in this sense, is not only the overindulgence of food and drink, but the endless drive to fill a void that can never be filled. Beelzebub lures mortals into excess, dulling their spirit while their bodies are stuffed, fattened, and rotted. In some depictions, he is bloated, covered in sores, surrounded by buzzing flies that feast on his flesh. In others, he takes the form of a gigantic insect, grotesque and monstrous, swarming over banquets as though hunger itself had grown wings. Under Beelzebub's rule, gluttony is more than appetite. It is captivity. It makes the body a slave to the belly, the soul numbed to higher purpose. He is the reminder that when desire rules unchecked, it will not nourish, it will devour.
Satan, wrath. If Beelzebub is hunger without end, then Satan is fury without limit. In Binsfeld's hierarchy, he rules over wrath, the fire of unrestrained anger, the blind force that destroys everything in its path. Across centuries of theology, Satan has been many things: the accuser, the adversary, the deceiver. But in this classification, he is wrath itself, the embodiment of rage that abandons reason, mercy, and restraint. In the Middle Ages, this image became terrifyingly real. As fear of witchcraft spread across Europe, every curse, every storm, every unexplained disaster was laid at Satan's feet. He was no longer a pitiful rebel. He became the roaring enemy, the one blamed for every act of violence against God and man. Wrath under Satan's reign is not righteous anger, the kind Scripture attributes to God against injustice. It is something darker. It is the fury that lashes out for vengeance, the hatred that festers until it erupts into bloodshed. It is war ignited by pride, murder kindled by hatred, curses shouted in blind rage. Be angry and do not sin, Scripture warns. Yet under Satan's influence, anger always twists into sin, always births destruction. Artists often depicted him as a monstrous figure, horns sharp, eyes aflame, his mouth open in an eternal scream. Not the whispering tempter, but the roaring beast, a reminder that wrath is noise without reason, a fire that burns both its target and the one who wields it. For Binsfeld, Satan's place was clear. Wrath is the sin that destroys both body and soul, turning man into his own executioner. Under his gaze, hatred is holy, vengeance feels just, and anger becomes the only law. But wrath never builds, it only burns, and in Satan's hands, the flames are endless.
Belphegor, sloth. The final prince in Binsfeld's infernal court is Belphegor, the ruler of sloth. Sloth is often dismissed as mere laziness, the refusal to work, the love of comfort. But in the theology of sin, and in the vision of Binsfeld, it is something far more corrosive. Sloth is the death of the will. It is the apathy toward goodness, the refusal to strive for virtue, the quiet surrender to decay. Belphegor embodies this not as an idle sleeper, but as a cunning corrupter. Legends describe him as a demon who takes on alluring forms, offering mortals promises of effortless wealth and ingenious inventions. He whispers shortcuts into their ears, devices that grant comfort, schemes that lead to quick riches. Yet every gift carries a hidden cost. The wealth slips away, the inventions collapse, the shortcut becomes a trap. What begins as ease ends as ruin, and Belphegor laughs at the downfall he engineered. In imagery, he is often shown seated on a throne, grotesque and complacent, smirking as humanity exhausts itself in the pursuit of false ease. At times, he is depicted as handsome, even seductive, a reminder that idleness often cloaks itself in pleasure before it rots into emptiness. For Binsfeld, sloth under Belphegor's command is not rest, but refusal. Refusal to love, to strive, to worship, to change. It is the soul's slow death, a wasting away in which nothing is done and nothing is sought. Sloth is the soil where every other sin can grow unchecked because nothing resists it. Belphegor is the prince of wasted potential. He does not conquer with terror or violence. He conquers with stillness, the silence of a will that simply stops moving until the soul itself withers into nothing.